sense as well and go back to intention. Live streamed and go back to intention, go back to common sense, that I wouldn't be like, why would I be buying a house full of all of these things if I didn't intend to want to purchase a house just because of that, right? So thanks for sharing the name of the case. Let me see if I had anything written down about, yeah, it's right here, right? So the court was required, that's one example, I think. The court was in that case, Gregory, let me call it Gregory. The court was required to determine if tapestry, some ornamental statues of lion in the hall, staircase and garden, some vases resting on niches, and some stone garden seats were fixtures or chattel. And it was held that they were fixtures, as they were integral to the decoration of the room, which were attached as wallpaper or frescoes. The statue of lions, the garden seats, and the vases were also fixtures, as they formed part of the overall architectural design. So, very interesting cases. And as I said, the cases bring home the point. I'm looking at the time. Odine, am I good with time? Is that what we're covering for this topic, right?
Hi, yes, if you're finished, then that's everything. So for you had ad column and fixtures. So if you're finished with that, then that's everything. We're good with that.
Okay, great. So guys, let me know if you have any questions. And
then Wendy, you butcher Andre name the whole presentation.
Oh, and what is her name?
Andre, not Ondine.
Oh, it's not Audine, it's Audrine. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I hope I didn't butcher the information. Sorry about that, Audrine. Audrine.
No, you didn't. You were really great.
All right, guys. All right. So that's my good deed. I'm gonna leave you. But if you have any questions, well, you can ask. I circulated some outlines that I had done, and I have no problem with them being shared to the team, with everybody.
I have a question. In reading, I think it says if something better elevates land, basically make it better. It would become a fixture. So in the example that you gave with the shipping container at the premises at the house, seeing that it would serve as a storage for that premises, wouldn't it become a fixture?
Right, but then so as a judge, you're going to have to now question what was the intention of Wendy. Did Wendy have that container on the property to be a part of the property? Or did Wendy have that container there to store the things she was taking out before she sold the property, or something for whatever other reason, or during like she was restoring or renovating the property? So you're going to have to investigate and find out what the intention was.
Okay, clear on that. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. All right, good night, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much,
and
Wendy.
all the best in your exam. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome. It's not just the intention of the annexation too, is the intention of the individual as well. Because, I think there were examples about even a microwave. You certainly want your microwave to be in your house to elevate the value of the house to you. But your intention is not to leave the microwave when you move out. So look at all those little, look at the cases. I tell you, the cases will help you to bring home the point more as well. Read the cases, guys. And have a great night. Thank you. All the best.
Okay. All right. So I'd like a general let me not say vote, but is everybody okay with ad colyum and fixtures? Or because the time was this segment was to finish at 8:40, I believe. Let me double check the time. All right, can somebody call? Oh wait, I found it. Yeah, this was a finish at 8:40, so we do have spare time. So we have the option of going on into the next topic, or okay. All right, and I confuse me now. No, what's the consensus? What do you guys want to do? Okay, Gabriel, can you type your question or unmute and ask your question again, please? Or Carol, if you remember it, can you like say Gabriel's question?
Good night. I think she was referring to a question that was on the worksheet about I believe it was Paul. If I could find it, I'll send it to you. So give me a second.
Okay, all right, please do.
All right, I have the question. Let me just read it and see if let's discuss it, no problem. Paul has purchased a dwelling house from Veronica, but is yet to take possession. He, however, gets wind that Veronica is removing some items he saw on his walkthrough before purchasing, including carpeting, paintings, wallpaper, French windows, and appliances, TVs, microwave, and stereos, which were plugged into sockets in the wall. He has also heard that Veronica is arranging to have removed a shipping container which was in the backyard and used for storage. Paul is concerned about these developments and wants to stop Veronica from removing these items. What advice do you have for him?
Okay, so I think the starting point would be, because the general position is that you always look to the degree or mode of the annexation. So you look at that test first. So how annexed is everything to the land, and then from that you would find your prima facie position, and then you can look to the purpose, which is the objective purpose, to discern whether it's going to retain its characteristic as a chattel or as a fixture. So based on this question, the things that we'd be contemplating are the carpeting, the paintings, wallpaper, French windows. Okay, so I guess we can take them one by one. So carpeting, what do you guys think is the prima facie position for carpeting? Okay, Judine, depends on what?
I mean, it depends on, like, can you hear me by the way?
Yeah, we're hearing.
It depends on the type of carpeting. Because, I mean, Jamaican houses don't necessarily have, like, carpets. Like, as in, like, something that's affixed in the house. Like, if you tear it off, it's going to literally deface the floor or whatever. It's like a rug or whatever. Something you kind of stick up and easily put down. So I think it depends. Yeah. I don't know.
Definitely
Really
agree.
depends.
Okay. Before I interject, I see Francine. You can go ahead.
Good night, everyone. Agreeing with what was just said and what was also said in the chat. It could be either a shuttle or a fixture. I did this question for my tutor, Auntie Marty. So just to be a little, I guess a pointer or something like that, but like something like a carpet, which mainly based on custom and usage it may be a shuttle or a fixture. Of course, you can like choose. However, it's best to discuss what would make it a shuttle and what would make it a fixture, just to say, because since it could be both, if you're writing on it something like this that it isn't as specific, explain both sides. So, for example, like if it's in the US, it's somewhat more than likely to be a fixture, because you know those carpeting that goes to right throughout the house. If it's like tacked on, and it would deface if it's taken off, so that would count as a fixture. But any typical Jamaican carpet would just be shuttle.
Yes, definitely agreed. Thank you, Francine. And I see Andre had mentioned, or was it Andre? Or I saw it was another person. Jesus Christ, I can't find back the message. But okay, but I saw that it was mentioned that Mr. Shackelford had actually pointed that out, that it really depends on the context. So for example, if it's a tiled floor and it's just like a regular little rug that you spread over the floor, like I have a carpet in my house, and I'm sure that's not a fixture, because it's not annexed in any way, shape, or form. And it's obvious that the intention is just for the temporary enjoyment of the property. But if it was, for example, a carpet that was, okay, I don't know how you put in carpets, but glued in or some way nailed in or something, and if the flooring underneath it, it's obvious that the carpet isn't intended to be taken off, then that can push it further to being a fixture as opposed to a shuttle. So I think hopefully that would argue it from both sides, as Francine was saying. But as Judine was saying, originally it would go back to it depends. And in this situation, it would be custom and usage and possibly degree of annexation that would be the major deciding factors. Anybody has any contrary opinions? Or anything to add? Okay, then what about the second option? The second item, which the paintings, what would the paintings be? What are you guys thinking? Nobody? Oh, I'm seeing depends in the chat. No. All right, depends on what. No, give me a little bit more.
Right. So if it's attached to the wall by like a nail, or using one of those command hook strips that you can just gently remove from the wall without leaving any damage, or if it leaves just a small nail, you can understand that it was never meant to be a fixture on the property. Or if it's like a large mural what spans from floor to ceiling, which is screwed in, and removing it would leave lasting damage, that is one of the criteria that would show that it was meant to not be removed or removed. So that's why I think it depends.
Yes, I definitely agree. Thank you for that. And I think that came out in a few of the cases. For example, Danecourt and Gregory, I hope I'm not butchering the case name, and Leanne Taylor, where it was saying that you pretty much have to look at how annexed the thing is, for one, and you also have to look at custom and usage. For example, especially depending on like the type of building. So if it's a building that has a lot of antiques, and it's obvious that those things, for example, as Jeffrey was saying, you have this big mural that's a part of the design of the building itself. And if you remove it, then it's going to be obvious, it's going to leave some permanent damage to the property, then that's definitely going to be a fixture. But if it's just one little painting way hung up, and it's nothing really coming from that. So it really depends on custom, how annexed it is. I think those would be the major deciding factors for this one as well. Okay. Okay, what's the next one? Wallpaper. What are your views on the wallpaper? Anybody? Why the chat so silent? Okay, they're coming in now. Can somebody that's like typing like explain why you have that position?
Hi, could
Nobody?
I explain?
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, go right ahead.
Okay, so I think that wallpaper, you have to use like special glue to glue it on the wall. So some person might come in and admire the wallpaper and say, this is what I want in my house. But when you remove it from the wall, you have to use special things and it can damage how the walls stay and you have to fix it and repair it. So I would say that wallpaper is a fixture because when it is removed, it really damages the wall. And I don't think it could be a shutter because why would you take off where you're carrying wallpaper go number one? Like it cannot reuse again, I'm sure. So I would say it's a fixture.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Cedran. Michaela, go ahead. Then after Michaela is done, Jadine, you can jump in.
I think it also depends on the intention because people who rent their property, the tenants may put up a wallpaper and their intention might not be to leave the wallpaper there because, as you know, a fixture affix the land, it will then becomes the owner's. But the tenant's intention wouldn't be for that to happen, basically. So I would say it depends on the intention, whether or not it becomes a fixture or a chattel.
Okay, thank you. Jadine, you want to respond or add?
Oh yeah, I was about to say, initially I had said chattel, but now like thinking about it, I'd say it's a fixture. Only because take into consideration how you'd actually put up, well, most wallpapers, to my knowledge, all the wallpapers, to take it down, it's going to leave damages because you have to because you have to literally scrape off wallpaper or peel it off, which is going to leave some type of, you're not gonna look good. Yeah. So I'd say that's true.
Okay. Okay, Jewel, go ahead.
I actually know of like, are you hearing me?
Yeah, we're hearing.
Yeah, I actually know of like some wallpaper where like you put up a protective layer first. So it doesn't really like damage the wall or anything like that. Cause like when I was living on Hall, I did something similar to that where I put like a protective layer of this like thin material. And then when you took it off, it was like completely fine. It was perfect. So I think I don't necessarily think it has to be a fixture.
Yes, and thank you for saying that because I was actually going to mention that, sir, because I think we did this, or when he said it, somebody had comments that aren't damaged upon removal. Because if it's wallpaper that can be easily removed without damaging the property, for example, as the one that Jewel had on campus, and that would be a fixture. Sorry, that would be a shuttle because it's easily removable. It doesn't affect the property, and it's obvious that in that situation, when you assess it objectively, the person, for example, the student there, is that a lease? You know what? The student there that's using the property. Obviously, the student did not intend to give that wallpaper to UA. And on the reverse
Odin,
side or on the flip side, yeah.
excuse me, Odin.
And
You
I don't
kinda,
think so.
you broke up there.
Okay, where did I break up?
Like when you started, you weren't hearing anything you're saying.
Okay, so start over then basically. All right.
Yes, please.
And don't come Audi and I don't name so. Okay, so I was going to say that Sir would say that or based on the discussion that we had with Sir, it's situational because somebody had pointed out that there are some wallpapers that can actually be removed easily. They can actually be removed easily without damaging the property. And also, if you look on the intention, the purpose, sorry, of annexation in, for example, Jewel's situation where she was leasing premises at UA and she put up the wallpaper, obviously just for her enjoyment of the space while she was there, it's going to turn on the fact that it's obvious that the intention was not for it to be affixed or become a part of the property. Like she never wanted to give it to UA. But if it's one that would obviously disintegrate or damage upon its removal, then it's more likely that it will be regarded to be a fixture instead. Because if something can disintegrate or if it damages a property when it's removed, then it's highly likely that it will be a fixture. No, a fixture. And the authority for that, because I see when they said we need to support with cases, the authority for that would be Mitchell and Cowie. That had to do with the disintegrating, the house that if you're the shuttle home, well, it was argued to be a shuttle home. I think if you removed it, it would just disintegrate on the spot. So they're saying that it was, on that ground, it would be a fixture because, yeah, upon removal, if it will disintegrate, that would be the presumption. Okay, so hold on, I have to look back on the running order. I have no clue what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I'm trying to remember if
I
it's
think we're supposed to be having a break now or something like that.
Yeah, I felt like it was a break. Okay, let me try and find the times. Boy, this is okay. I found it. Okay, so we have a break until 9. And when we come back, I will be presenting on estates and settlements. Then you'd have another short break. And then Karen is going to knock us away with tenures to end the night. So we will come back at 9 o'clock. So yeah, see you then. Joel, I'm sure half of the people would share the sentiment. As in, if you guys don't, then we can press along. But I feel
Yes, press on because we want to go to bed. Come.
Okay, can I get a show of hands first, or do you want us to like just cut the break instead to make it like just 5 minutes for it to breeze instead of a whole 20? Okay, can you give me hands?
Until
Hands if you want
9:50.
that. Hands if you want just a shorter break and like a 5-minute break and then we come back. Show of hands, please.
All right, so I think most persons are saying a shorter break. So we could give until, what is 8:50?
Yeah, I guess. But that's, yeah, okay. Okay, so till 8:50. Okay, and I'm going to be attacked if I don't, start with the given time. So it's 8:50 on the dot, and yeah, let us go straight ahead. All right. Okay, can somebody confirm that you're seeing my screen, please?
Yes, we're seeing your screen.
Thank you. Okay, so, all right, Big Bad Estates. Yeah, let's go. All right, so an estate refers to an abstract or conceptual tool connoting the rights to hold an interest in land with reference to time. So to break that down, estate, the term estate is an abstract tool, meaning it's highly based on concept. So it's not something physical per se, it's something in the abstract. And it pretty much connotes or refers to the right to hold an interest in land with reference to time. And I remember in the lectures, I remember persons were having an issue differentiating between tenure and estate. So I just put something here to hopefully help. So the tenures would refer to the conditions under which the land is held, and then the estate would refer to the duration of a person's interest in land. So once we're talking about, or once the discussion has some elements of the amount of time that a person has to pretty much use the land, that is in reference to the estate. So there are two types of estates. They're freehold and leasehold estates. We had discussed that freehold estates would fall under realty, where you have the fee simple, fee tail, and the life estate. And we had also discussed that leasehold estates, that falls under the category of chattel real. So those are the two types of estates, freehold and leasehold. So the major difference between freehold and leasehold estates is that with freehold estates, you don't know how long the estate will last. And that is because, for example, with a life estate, you don't know when the person is going to die. The person who the estate, or the person who measures the estate, you don't know when they're going to die. That cannot be ascertained. And with, for example, fee tail and fee simple, you don't know when there's going to be a failure of heirs. So because of that, there is this idea of uncertainty of duration. It could go on forever or it couldn't. You don't know. And the other type is the leasehold estate, and that has a certainty of duration. So for example, you know that you're holding this property for 24 years, or you're holding this, you have rights, you can use this property for a month. There's some certainty of duration because leases have terms that will pretty much say how long you can use the property. So when we're talking about freehold estates, we're going to realize that there's this element of uncertainty, and that is intrinsic to the idea of a freehold estate. Okay, is that clear so far?
Clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going fast. Okay, lovely. All right, so important terms, important terms to note. So grant, grantor, grantee. So a grant refers to the device which you use to transfer an interest or title in property. So when you hear about a grant, we're going to be talking about the device that is used to convey an interest in property to another person. Joel, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you could just go back to the last slide real quick, just for a second, so I can screenshot it.
Oh, these will be, I'm going to send these to you guys, by the way. I'll send it after, so you'll have access to this.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so important terms to note. As I said, the grant is a device whereby an interest in property or the title in property is passed from one person to another. A grantor, or the grantor, refers to the person who is making the grant. So the grantor has the bigger interest, and then he carves out the smaller interest from it. So the person who the interest is transferred to under the grant is the grantee. So in other words, the grantee is a person receiving the grant. So, okay, yeah, I don't have that. Other important terms, remainder and reversionary interest or reversionaries. So a remainder, so this comes about where the grantor holds a larger interest and some smaller interest is carved out to another person. And then upon the determination of that smaller interest, the remainder of the interest passes on to remaindermen. So to break that down, when there is a remainder interest, what happens is that on the determination of the estate, the interest in the land is passed on to some other persons, and these are known as remaindermen. So for example, if you see a grant saying 2x for life, then to Y and Z. Y and Z will, they will have an interest in the property after the determination of the estate given to X. So they will have a right to the property only after X's interest it terminates by death. And on the other hand, with a reversionary interest, what happens is that the interest that is given to the grantee is then passed back to the grantor upon the determination of the estate. So pretty much he has a possessory right, so he's able to regain his property after the determination of the estate. Is that clear so far? Is everybody clear with these two?
Yeah. Clear.
Okay, Joel, is because your hand was up. So I was checking if.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if I got it right. So basically with like the remainder, what is happening is like you have the smaller interest, right? And instead, so the reversion is where it would go back to the original grantor, right?
Yeah.
And then with a remainder, like when that smaller interest ends, instead of going back to the grantor, it goes to someone else who the grantor made provisions for.
Yes.
Okay,
Solid, just like that. Okay, great. All right, so now we're going to go into the types of estates. And I put it in a table because, yeah, I'd have been stressed to just do everything from scratch. But, so I'm going to discuss one column at a time. So the major things that you look for, or the major distinguishing factors that you can use to find the characteristics of the different estates are inheritance, rights of alienability, and rights of use. So rights of alienability can be either inter vivos or testamentary. So both of these are supposed to be under rights of alienability. So that just means the power that the person has to dispose of that property, to alienate it. And that can be done within the life, or that can be done after the life through some testamentary objects. Listen to me. So, all right, so inheritance. So with a fee simple estate, this has the widest class of heirs. So it means that there is general transmissibility, so it can pass to both the lineal and collateral heirs. So lineal heirs refers to the direct descendants of that person. So that would be the children. And collateral heirs takes other persons into consideration, so other family, right? So it's not just restricted to the children of it's not restricted to the children of that person. With regarding the rights of alienability, what happens is that there is, because it's a fee simple estate, and remember, fee simple is regarded the closest a person can come to absolute ownership of property, because under the common law, you can't absolutely own property, but this is the closest you can get. So you are able to pretty much do whatever you want with the property. And that means that within your lifetime, you can pass your interest to somebody else. And it also means that upon death, you can, yeah, that's the general position for a fee simple. I'm thinking. but I think so. If I change my mind, I'll correct it. But I think so. Yeah, so what happens is that you have the option to pretty much do whatever you want with the property. So with inter vivos disposition, it means that you're able to pass on that interest in land to somebody within your life. And importantly, this right was not recognized until 1200. Is that 12? Yes, this right was not recognized until 1200, right? So before that, you could not pass on any rights. You could not alienate your property that you held in fee simple at all. But now the holder of a fee simple estate can dispose of the property as he wishes. And regarding the testamentary disposition, no, originally you weren't able to dispose of your estate so that it passes to someone else up after your death, right? So land could not be willed. However, this position has been changed by the statute of wills, and now real estate is divisible. And I think this position is reflected in the Wills Act of Commonwealth jurisdictions. So now we are actually able to dispose of a property that you hold in fee simple through wills or other testamentary devices. And the rights of use. So because it's pretty much your property and you have almost absolute ownership over it, the tenant can do literally anything that he wants, anything that he sees fit. So the only limitations are whether or not he is committing a nuisance or the general law pretty much. So you have the right, and we'll learn this in torts, you have the right to use your land as you see fit, once it does not interrupt the rights of another person. So if it interrupts the rights of another person, so for example, where you bring an action in nuisance or under the rule in Rylands and Fletcher, then obviously your rights are restricted because you can still face liability, even though you can use your land as you see fit. So it's subject to the interests of neighbors and other persons. And as I said earlier, the general law. So the statute itself can actually place restrictions on persons. So for example, I believe in the Mines Act of a lot of Commonwealth jurisdictions, it's actually said that you don't, you're not able to mine anything on your land. That comes in some jurisdictions. Also, there's a Civil Aviation Act that says that even though you have absolute, or even though you have ownership over the property, you're not necessarily able to prevent planes from flying across, etc. So the statute itself can actually put limitations on your rights of use and abuse and what you can claim or what you can bring a claim for. Does that make sense so far? Did I lose anybody? Okay, great. All right. So I know I didn't do words of limitation. I'm going to get to that after. So going into the type of fee simple estates. So there is fee simple absolute, there's a terminable fee simple, and then there's the fee simple upon condition subsequent. So the fee simple absolute refers to an estate that is not liable to determine on the occurrence of a terminating event. So this means that there is no event that actually limits a person's estate for a fee simple absolute. There's no terminating event. So the only limitation is the failure of heirs. So upon a failure of heirs, then that is when the fee simple absolute will actually terminate. But apart from that, there's no event that actually limits a fee simple absolute. And that's why it's called absolute, because it's not limited in its duration. And this can be contrasted to a determinable fee simple. And what happens is that you have the estate will determine, or determine in this sense means terminate, upon the occurrence of a specified event or upon the occurrence of a failure of the lives of the tenant and his heirs. So pretty much it can be determined by 1, failure of heirs, or 2, the occurrence of a specified event. And generally the words that you'll see for conveyance are until, so long as, whilst, during. all of those are reflective of a determinable fee simple generally. And then there is the fee simple upon condition subsequent. So like the determinable fee, it has some other elements that is generally in the form of an event or an action or an event basically that can occur. But with the fee simple estates, a condition is attached to the grant and the condition is not intrinsic. So it's separate to the grant. So it's attached to it, but it's not a part of the grant itself. And what happens is that upon the occurrence of sorry about that. Upon the occurrence of that specified event, then, or upon the fulfillment of that condition, then the estate will terminate. And the general words of conveyance used, yes, exactly. So the event must be one that may or may not be able to occur. But if there is, there must be the possibility that the estate can go on forever. And if that possibility does not exist, then that actually is something that can void the condition. But yes, so the general words used are, general words of conveyance are on condition that, provided that, but if it happened that. So generally it's said, provided that this happens, then this will occur, etc., etc. I think I have a comparison. Okay, so the difference between the determinable fee and the condition subsequent. So as per Shire and Byrne, if the terminating event is integral and a necessary part of a formula from which the size of an interest is to be ascertained, the result is the creation of a terminable interest. But if the terminating event is external to the limitation, and that means it's a divided clause from the grant, the interest granted is an interest upon condition. So I summarize this in two statements here. So it means that if the condition is integral to the grant, meaning if it's a part of the grant, it's intrinsic to the grant, then that means that we're talking about a determinable fee simple. But if the condition is separate to the grant, if it just catch on from the grant, then we're talking about a condition subsequent. So because of that, if the event is voided for some reason in a determinable fee simple, it pretty much means that the whole thing is void. But if that happens with a condition subsequent, all it does is remove it removes the condition. Because the grant is fine, all that happens is that the condition is removed, and so it will convert to a fee simple absolute. Feel like that was confusing, so I'm going to just go over that. So if the condition is integral to the grant, we're talking about a determinable fee simple. And because it is integral, if that condition occurs, then it means that the estate is just done, it terminates. But on the other hand, where there is a fee simple condition subsequent, the condition is not integral to the grant in the same sense. So it is attached to the grant, but it is not intrinsic to the grant itself. So therefore, if the condition is void, all that happens is that you pretty much cut off that condition, and then the grant remains, but it's converted to a fee simple absolute because it no longer has a terminating event attached to it. Does that make sense? Yes, no? Okay, can I get more assents or more?
Yes, it does.
Okay, just making sure. All right, remember, if you have any questions, you can always raise your hand and ask me to repeat or whatever you need. Okay, so words of limitation. Okay, repeat. All right. Okay, so let's go again. So if the condition is integral to the grant, it is a determinable fee simple. And because it is integral to the grant, it means that if that event occurs, then the grant is just done, right? But where there's a condition, where there's a fee simple condition subsequent, what happens is that the event or the grant, the condition. So the condition is attached to the grant, but it is not intrinsic or integral to the grant itself. So that basically means that the grant can exist without that condition. So all that happens is that you literally just chop off that condition, and then the grant remains, but it's converted to a fee simple absolute because there's no longer any condition attached to it. Yes, Oren?
Yeah, that's me. Can you just, I have like two questions, but can you go back to the last two slides just so I just want to see the language really quick for the last two.
Last two?
Yeah.
As in
Okay,
this?
so, and then, yes, and the one before that. Okay. Okay. The language was confusing me. Okay, but now that I've seen that, my second question was, one of them allows the grantor the right to re-entry, and the other one automatically terminates. Which is which? I don't remember which is which.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this, then I will give an example because I see the masses in the chat on Team Alia. But all right, so because the condition is integral to the grant in a determinable fee simple, it will terminate automatically. So it will terminate automatically once that occurs. So once that terminating event occurs, then that's just it. So it's automatic. And because it's automatic, you don't have a right to re-entry. Sorry, mixing it up. I was saying that the grantee doesn't have he can't do anything pretty much about it. So there's no waiver and estoppel available for him because it means that from the terminating event happens, that is it. The grant is done. But that's what would happen is that you'd have a reversionary interest because when the terminating event occurs, what happens is that the estate then passes back to the grantor or to whoever he says it should go to if that event happens. So where it's a determinable fee simple, there is the okay. All right, so where it's a determinable fee simple, then what happens is that it's an automatic termination, and then the grantor has a right as a reversionary interest because he can get back the property, he can recover it, and the grantee pretty much can't do anything about it. And then on the other hand, where there's a fee simple condition subsequent, what happens is that the grantor has to actually exercise or use positive action and exercise his right of re-entry. So it's not an automatic termination because remember, the event is not intrinsic to the grant itself. So that means that it can continue to exist. The grant can continue to exist even if that condition is fulfilled. So what would happen is that the grantor, meaning the person who gave the grant, he then has to walk into the property, exercising his right of re-entry and say, yeah, man, get out. So he has to actually take positive action to get that person removed, or it won't terminate automatically. Does that make sense to you, Aaron?
Yes, that cleared it up. Thank you.
Okay. And I see Carol asking me to explain estoppel. So it's pretty much where it's an equitable remedy where the courts will step in and say that you allow the person to pretty much depend on something, and because of that, it's unconscionable to just go back against your words. So the court is going to prevent you. So the court is going to prevent you from just jumping in and saying, okay, give me back the property. So because I had said earlier that the grantor has actually exercised the right of re-entry by a positive action. So what would happen is that if, for example, there's a fee simple condition subsequent, right? And the condition occurs. So that means that the grant can be terminated now, but the grantor doesn't do anything. So years pass now since the condition happened. Let's say if the condition was if the person gets married, then the estate terminates, right? The person get married and she in the house with her husband and her pitney for 2 years now. And then the grantor gets up and says, all right, time to get out. The court might be able to use estoppel and say, no, you allowed this person to continue using the estate. You allowed him to continue using the property. So because of that, you can't now just get up and exercise your rights to kick them out, because you allowed them to rely on the continuation of the estate. Does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay. And now the example. Okay. So an example to differentiate between determinable fee and condition subsequent. Okay. So all right, so let's say for the condition subsequent, I can use about the same example I just, okay, let me not use that. Let's say it says that I'm not using the precise or the formal words, but let's say the condition is that the estate will terminate if Zoe marries a Black man, right? So let me just write that down. Estate will terminate if Zoe marry a Black man. If Zoe find Black man, estate terminates. So let's say Zoe does find that Black man and Zoe marries him and whatever. What would happen is that this type of condition is actually going to be voided by the courts, most likely, and it's going to be voided on the grounds of public policy, right? So the courts might strike out this condition on the grounds of public policy because, of course, this is perpetuating or this is allowing for racism. So the courts might say, all right, striking this out. So it takes off the condition. So what remains is the fact that Zoe still has some interest in the land, right? So if it was a fee simple, so Zoe would still have the fee simple. It's just that it's no longer a fee simple upon condition subsequent because there is no condition anymore. The courts have voided this condition. So now what happens is that whatever estate there was is now a fee simple absolute because there's no condition. And remember that both a determinable and a fee simple condition subsequent have some form of terminating event. So if there's no terminating event, it means therefore that it's a fee simple absolute. And remember, I had said right here that a condition is separate from the grant in a condition subsequent, or it is not integral. So it means that it's not nothing for the court to say, strike this off. It can easily be removed and then the grant will continue to exist, but it will just be a fee simple absolute instead. However, if this happened with a determinable fee simple, then the whole grant is voided because remember that it is intrinsic to the grant itself. So it's intrinsic to the grant itself. So that would mean that if a part of it is voided, then the grant itself cannot exist. Yeah, so how am I feeling about that? Is that clear?
Yeah, it's clear. Love the example.
Okay.
I got a nice screen, so.
Okay, good. All right. So words of limitation now. So at common law, generally there's a particular phrase that is required, and that particular phrase is to X and his heirs. So what this means is that if this phrase is not used when you're trying to convey your interest in land or when you're trying to convey a fee simple, then pretty much you're only passing a life interest. So the main thing to get is that if you don't use this phrase or these formal words of limitation, then pretty much you're only conferring a life estate, not a fee simple. And the Owusu actually acknowledges all of these as ineffectual phrases or ineffective phrases. So if any of these are used, then it's not going to confer a fee simple. So if you see to P and his ear, that's not going to work because air is singular, which means say is a one picnic. Suppose you have 3 picnic, what's going to happen? To P or his ears, this is 2 different things that are being done right here. So, you know, pretty much all of these phrases are not sufficient to provide a fee simple. So what you'd have to use is this phrase to X and his ears. And pretty much what happens is that if you don't use these, only a life estate is going to pass. Is that clear so far?
Yeah, it is.
Clear.
Clear.
Okay, girl. I hear somebody yawning. My gosh. Okay. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
So I understand the whole we can go back on the last slide, please. 1 second.
Okay, no problem. Oh, whoops. Okay, there you go.
So I understand the whole to X and his ears thing, but I'm gonna understand why to P and his seed, why that don't work.
I'm
Why
actually
does
not sure why that one isn't. I think like I'm actually not sure why that one doesn't suffice, but it's just it has been used in several cases and the court just said, yeah, this isn't going to cut it. So yeah, just no to it. And even in Owusu, it doesn't even give an explanation as to why, like it gave for the first 2. It just says, if you use this, then osh to you. Jadine, your hand was up. You had something to add?
I was about to say his seed, maybe singular, and similar to the first one to P and his peer.
Yeah, I guess. Also, I have no clue why. Devian, go ahead, take it away.
Sorry, but can you go back? I just have a question about the previous slide to this, where you were discussing
this.
Yes, the public policy issue for the determinable fee simple. What happens if it's breaking some public policy? It just
Then the
vitiates
whole,
entirely?
yeah, because it's integral to the grant itself. So everything just vitiates.
So that, okay. Does that mean the land goes back to the grantor who gave them in the, or
I
that
would
wasn't-
assume so.
Okay, all right, thanks. Versus the condition subsequent, it doesn't terminate it entirely, only the condition is removed.
Yeah.
Right? And it becomes a fee simple absolute.
Yep.
Okay.
Precisely.
All right, thanks.
Oh, so Londies, boy, you came up here and told me how to pronounce it, and me will have my name butchered tonight. Can you help you out? Londies, I hope that is it. He was he was asking what would happen. He was asking basically what would happen in a determinable fee versus a condition subsequent if the terminating event is rendered void. So that's what I answered. Okay, and regarding words of limitation, the Conveyancing Act of 1881 provides another phrase, that can be used. So no, you can actually use in fee simple as well. However, this doesn't mean that all the other phrases before that were just discussed and said were ineffective can now be used. So all this act really did was it says that no, you can use in fee simple and you can also use and these areas. So it only gave another one, but the same rule applies that if any of the other terms, are used, then those won't confer a life estate. However, this position has been changed in most Caribbean jurisdictions. So the presumption is switched. So what happens now is that if you don't have any formal words in your, if you don't have any formal words in the conveyance, the court is going to hold that you intended to pass a fee simple unless some contrary intention appears. So it's reversed because remember before, if you didn't use any formal words, then the court is saying, okay, it's a life estate only. But this position has been switched in the Caribbean. So now where there are no formal words used, then what is presumed is that it was a fee simple that is granted. So you can pass a fee simple even without using the formal words. So unless a contrary intention appears, then it is the fee simple that will be passed in the conveyance. And this is seen in the Trinidad and Tobago Conveyancing and Law of Property Act, as well as the Jamaica Conveyancing Act. Everybody clear on this?
Clear.
Okay, great. Okay, and the next is a fee tail. And okay, the next is a fee tail. And remember that, all right, I'm going to need a second. My battery is dying. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, so remember that fee tail estates were created by the Statute de Donis Conditionalibus from 1285. And what this was because the landed class really wanted to get or to keep their land within their lineage. So they wanted to protect their interest in land and keep it within their family. And because of that, they lobbied for a statute to this effect, and this statute was eventually passed. So this statute gave rise to fee tail estates. So the first thing to note about fee tail estates is that this is limited to lineal heirs, which means only the children the fee estate will pass to. So only the children or the lineal descendants or the lineal heirs can actually inherit a fee tail. And remember that with a fee simple, it's general transmissibility, meaning it's not just the children that can actually inherit the property or the estate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is rights of alienability and rights of alienability. So so the estates cannot be disposed of in the technical sense within the lifetime of a person. It means that you can't make any transaction with the land that could literally just remove or extinguish the rights of the persons who are supposed to inherit the property after you. So general position is that there's no inter vivos disposition allowed. You can't depart from the property. And that's why what used to happen in those days was that they would say that they're given a fee simple, knowing that they had a fee tail, and they would collect money from it. And at the end of the day, it would just revert to them because you cannot dispose of any property if it's a fee tail. Similarly, you can't dispose of it by will because this is only inheritable by heirs. And regarding the rights of use, because this is pretty much the same as a fee simple, minus the fact that minus the heirs, because the heirs is a major difference, and then that affects the rights of alienability. The rights of use remain the same because you still pretty much have the land to do what you want with it. It's just that it's subject to the same thing as above, whereby you can't do anything that will affect your neighbors, or you can't do anything that's contrary to statute. So any restriction imposed by statute is going to be enforceable, so you will be subject to it. But in general, you have the same rights of use as a person with a fee simple estate would have. Gregory?
Yeah. All right. Go back to the slide, Pamela, please. The previous slide.
Okay.
Good. We recognize that it is not able to pass through a will. What device then could enable it to be inherited by his heirs?
That issue has actually been confronted with modern statutes and modern legislation. So no, I believe with the statutes of frauds, the statutes of frauds actually allows for you to be able to dispose of this interest. Was it frauds or fines and recoveries? Fines and recoveries. That allows you to actually do all of this. So no, this in the Commonwealth or statutes allows us to actually do this, but the common law position is that you cannot transfer a fee tail. Yeah, so some jurisdictions actually completely did away with fee tails. I believe Belize and Guyana are two examples, but for some you can actually, there's a statute, I believe it's Fines and Recoveries Act. Fines and Recoveries Act, and that has been adopted in our legislation. Can somebody like confirm that for me? I know there's a statute that does it. I just can't remember the name. But yes, that should answer your question, Gregory.
Yeah, for the Fines and Recoveries Act.
Sorry, repeat.
No, I was just saying, I'm confirming that yes, it's the Fines and Recoveries Act.
Okay.
And in Jamaica in particular, the Jamaica Conveyancing Act provides for it to be transferred as a fee simple.
Yes, thank you for that. So repeating section, that was provided for by the Fines and Recoveries Act, and that has been adopted in modern statute, for example, the section 74 of the Jamaica Conveyancing Act. And there are other similar acts in other jurisdictions as well. Question, in fee tail, is there a reversion or? Okay, I see. Now go on with the question. Okay, let me read. Hold on. Okay, so let me answer on these first. Okay, there is no, I don't think there could be a reversion under a fee tail. I think it would, if there's supposed to be anything that arises from a fee tail, it would probably be a remainder man. And I say that because it would say to, for example, X and to X in fee in tail, but in tail would be in reference to just the lineal descendant. So if you want to think of the lineal descendants as remainder men, then I guess that would be accurate. But I don't know if it's technically called remainder men. That's the issue. But I just know that anybody that is the lineal descendant or lineal heir would be entitled to the property under a fee tail. With the entire P and his C situation, please have something. Yes, I was thinking it could possibly have something to do with that, which is why it's not effective. But I'm not sure. I said I'm just really not sure why it's not used. And I can ask her that. Okay. All right, so words of limitation. So in a fee tail estate, it's required that the words of limitation reference the heirs and that this reference is specific to heirs of the grantee's body. So words of procreation are seen when we're doing fee tail estates, and these are words that literally just confine the heirs qualified to inherit to the direct heirs of the grantee. So for example, in this situation, to X is the word of purchase because it's saying that this is a person who will acquire the property, and his heirs, this is limitation because it's saying, what the limits of the estate are. And then of his body is confining it or pretty much qualifying it so that it's obvious that it's going to be only direct descendants or direct or lineal heirs will actually be able to inherit the property. Yeah. Okay, and life estate now. So remember, there are two types of life estates. A life estate SAVI, which is measured by the life of the grantee, and a life estate per attribute, which is measured by the life of another person, so a third party. So a life estate SAVI is not inheritable. And remember that inheritance means your ability to get something, to inherit something upon death, or just to be able to get that same estate. So you can't inherit a life estate SAVI because it is measured by the life of the grantee. So if that grantee dies, that estate does not exist anymore. That estate ceases to exist upon the death of the grantee. So because of that, it cannot be inherited by anyone. The estate just ends. However, with an estate per attribute, it is possible for it to be inherited, and this is by virtue of the Statute of Frauds, and the Statute of Frauds has been consolidated in our jurisdiction by the Wills Act. So it is pretty much possible for you to have a life estate per attribute, and it is capable of inheritance. Because what that would mean is that the person whose life is, okay, let me try and write an example. To earlier, okay, let me not call nobody name. To X for the life of Jenny. I don't think nobody named Jenny. Yeah, so let's say it is to X for the life of Jenny. And then X outlives Jenny. No, I don't want to call your name because I was going to say that somebody did dead. So let's say it's to X for the life of Jenny. So let's say X dies, right? So, and remember, the estate is measured for the life of Jenny. So Jenny's life measures the estate. What that means is that when X dies, the estate still exists, or the estate still remains. So that means that there is some estate left. So what the Statute of Frauds and the Wills Act have allowed is that the remainder of the estate can be passed on to the heirs. So, or it can be disposed of through some testamentary instruments like a will. So you can say, if I die before the estate ends, it should be passed to whomever. It should be passed to Alia, and then Alia can get the property after. And I'm pointing out that this is because the person upon who the life estate is measured still exists, meaning she's still alive. Jenny is alive. As long as Jenny is alive, this estate still exists. So if the grantee dies, that does not change the fact that the estate still exists. And that's why it is able to be passed on to a third party. Okay. All right. So inter vivos, is that a question? What happened before the statute came into effect? I actually think that that was just it. Like, you couldn't do anything about it. Actually, I believe it was general and special occupancy. My bad. So there was something called general occupancy, which meant that anybody who was able to go, anybody could go onto the estate and they could just possess the estate. They could literally just go on the estate and live there, pack up all of them things and stay there. And the courts would just say the first person to claim the property will actually hold that property, in life estate. So yeah, so there was general occupancy that would have been used. So the Statute of Frauds actually abolished, in a sense, the rule of general occupancy, because it says no, instead of the interest going to just anybody that's pack up them things and sit down on the land after the person dies, it will pass to the personal representative, and then it can be distributed accordingly. Yes. Okay. So in survivor's disposition, oh no, putting me on the spot, man. In survivor's disposition. So remember, in survivor's disposition means the ability to transfer interest in land during life, so during the person's life. So this can be done with a life estate savvy, but only a life interest can be passed. So when this happens, you are creating a per ultra V life estate. So let's say X is given the property. Let's say X, okay, Alia has a property for the duration of her life. She can then pass that property to Adrian, she can then pass that property to Adrian and give him a life estate, but then it becomes a life estate per ultra V for Adrian because it's not going to be measured against Alia's life. So if you transfer or alienate property within life to another person, then it's going to become a life estate per ultra V because that person's estate is going to be dependent on the life of the grantee. Okay, Gregory?
Yes?
Yes, your hand was up. You have a question?
No, that may have been from previous time. My apology.
Oh, okay, all right. And a and a life estate for ultra vino, the same thing applies, but of course only a life estate can be granted. And for testamentary disposition, the same position applies as we had discussed for inheritance. Remember, the life estate it ceases to exist upon the death of that person. So of course, if you're dead, you can't give to nobody, you have nothing to forgive. So you can't dispose of anything by will because the estate terminates upon your death. And with a life estate per ultra V, as I said earlier, because of the Statutes of Frauds and the Wills Act, it is actually inheritable by the personal representative. So it can be administered. It can be administered basically from some testamentary instruments or device. And lastly, rights of use and abuse. So unlike the holders of a fee tail estate and a fee simple estate, the holder of a life estate is going to be limited by the doctrine of waste. And that is because of the interest of, generally there's an interest of to remainder men. So you can't allow the person holding the life estate to do anything that will affect the future rights of other persons. So as you know, there are 4 types of waste. I'm out tired. So can somebody jump in and explain what these 4 types of waste means? Just anyone, what you understand from them at least. Somebody jump in now. Yes, Alia. It look like you want to try it out. Alia Fred, somebody wants to, you Alia da Silva, you want to try. Okay, the question was, I was just asking somebody to just briefly explain the different types of waste, just what you understand from it. Come on, Carol, you go. I'll write it for life. Come on, come right out.
Okay. So ameliorating waste, that's when the person kind of adds value or they improve the property. So it's not technically waste, but it's under there, so it's ameliorating waste. And if the lieutenant does this, then the is the remainder, I don't know. So the remainder men, they're not entitled to damages. They can only get a injunction to just stop the improvements, right?
Yeah, you're correct.
Permissive, that one is when the I describe it as like omissions. They don't take any steps to fix stuff that go wrong. I think an example that Sarah was giving in class is that if there's a blocked drain and you don't clear it, I just make the place flow out, that would be permissive. Yeah, I think somebody was saying not maintain the value of the land. Voluntary is where you take positive acts to destroy the land. So some examples would be like cutting down trees and stuff like that. And then equitable waste is when a tenant is given, a tenancy without impeachment of waste. And with that now, because you have that, you can basically get away with a lot. But with equitable waste, that's where you've gone too far. So I think Sarah gave an example where like you have a mansion or something and the person licked down the mansion. So that would be going too far. I think, what word were you using again, Andre, in the tutorial? Wonton? Yes.
Wonton. Yeah, wonton.
Wonton. That word. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if I should say anything more.
Yes, that's it. Thank you so much, Carol. You did great. You did great, sweetie. Okay, so as Carol said, and as you can see from my little jottings on the board, I found, like, I guess this is a way you can use to remember it. So permissive is omission. You allow something to happen by not doing something you're supposed to do. Ameliorating actually improves the property, but still it's regarded as a type of waste because it increases the burden on the property. Voluntary refers to where there's a positive act. So something that is, you actually do something to reduce the value of the property. And then as Carol had stated, equitable waste arises where a person is granted a tenancy without impeachment of waste. And that pretty much means that without impeachment means that nothing can be brought, no action can be brought against them, or they won't be punished for any waste. However, there is a point where you can go too far. So where there are wanton acts of destruction, it pretty much you can be liable for that, right? So where you go beyond the scope of freedom that you were granted, then you can face some liability. So for example, if there's a mansion and you just gonna knock it down. And another example Sir gave was just like throwing chemicals all over agricultural lands, etc. So those things would be going a bit too far. The remedies are available for each. So as Carol had mentioned, damages and injunctions are available for permissive, ameliorating, and equitable. But there is no, what did I just say? Damages and injunctions here are available for permissive, ameliorating, and equitable. However, for I mixed it up. Ameliorating, ameliorating, you can only get an injunction, no damages. Let me write it so my brain doesn't confuse it. Ameliorating, only injunction. And I think as Carol was hinting to earlier, it's because it's not technically, what? It's no injunction?
No, you're right.
Oh, I'm confused. The chat is confusing me.
No, she was just saying you were wrong the first time because you said both damages.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So ameliorating, only injunction is available, no damages, but both damages and injunction are available for all of the other types of waste. So I hope I didn't confuse how I mixed it up the first time. So ameliorating, only injunction. And I was saying that this is kind of based on what Carol was saying earlier, whereas it's not really damage in the technical sense because it actually improves the value of the property. So, it's not going to entitle you to monetary compensation for something that improves the value of the property. Okay, so I have to speed along now because we kind of reached the time that we're supposed to start tenures. So I knew this was going to be long, but boy. All right. Luckily, Sir had stated that we don't need to know the specifics of barring the entail. Yes, Sir has said we don't need to know the specifics of barring the entail, and that the most we really needed to know is that this was a means whereby persons found a way to circumvent the common law position regarding fee tails. So what was done was that some fictitious schemes were created whereby persons barred the estate from the heirs, which meant that the heirs couldn't recover the property. And then the second step was to bar the remainderment and reversioners so that they could not sue for the property either. So all you need to know about barring the entail, according to Sir, is that this was fictitious schemes arose, and this was to circumvent the common law position regarding fee tails, whereas you couldn't transfer a fee tail, so it starts to just make a fee tail a fee simple, pretty much. And the Fines and Recoveries Act is what actually allowed for the owner to pass a fee tail or to convert it into a fee simple absolute. So basically, the Fines and Recoveries Act formalized all of this process, or it recognized what these fictitious schemes were aiming to do, and it made it pretty much easier for the same thing to be done. So under the Fines and Recoveries Act, a fee tail can then be, you can transfer a fee simple from a fee tail. Okay, soon done. All right, not bad. Okay, so settlement. And I flagged the Jamaica Settled Land Act because, yeah, so you can look on any of the settlement acts. So for all of the different areas we've done, you've seen that some important statutes have arisen. For this area, it's the Settlement Land Act or the Settled Land Act. And a settlement pretty much exists once you have successive interests in land created by a single grant. So for example, to X for Y in remainder, two successive interests arise because this is a life tenancy to X, and at the same time, upon the termination of X's estate or X's interest in land, Y will then have an interest. So two successive interests are created. So where more than one interest arise from a single grant, then this is known as a settlement. So what the Settled Land Act does is it provides the power to transact by giving life tenants the ability to sell, exchange, lease, or mortgage the land. So now life tenants can literally do whatever they want to. Well, they're not whatever they want to do, but they have greater freedom over the land. So they can dispose of it within their lifetime. So the main intention behind the statute was to make marketability or to improve marketability. So it allows for land to be alienated so that, it can be commercial for commerciality, basically. And the result is that if the life tenant is able to actually dispose of his interest in the land, obviously that's going to affect the remainder man or the reversioners. So what happens is that in the event that the life tenant actually decides to dispose of the property, he can, if he decides to dispose of the property, what he will have to do is provide some form of monetary compensation to the remainder man or the reversioners. So for example, if he sells the property, he has to give all of that money for the sale of the property to the remainder man or the reversioners. And if there's any interest or any additional from that money, then he can keep it for himself. But the value of the property must go to the remainder man or the reversioners. And this is known as overreaching. So where there is some interest in the land, but you pretty much give something else in lieu of that interest. So you convert the interest that the remainder man has from the land itself to the monetary value of the land. So they no longer have an interest in the land itself because they're given money that equates to the value of the land. Is that clear so far? Yes, no. Okay. So, all right. So what happens is that there's something known as overreaching. And overreaching is where you convert the interest of the remainder man or the reversioner from the property itself to the something else. So in this case, it's some monetary compensation, so monetary value for the land. So pretty much the remainder man or the reversioner, they can't actually say when this is done, they can't now go and claim for the land because they're given the monetary value of the land instead. So because they have it's pretty much like you're buying out their interest in the land. Like you can think of it in that way, because they're getting money that's worth their interest pretty much. So if the life tenant sells the land, because it's affecting the interests of the remainder man and the reversioners, he has to give them something. So what he gives is generally going to be money that is going to be worth the value of the land itself. Okay, is that clear now? Yes, okay. All right, and the very last thing is that there are restrictions to settlement. So basically, the life tenant, he can't just do things recklessly. So he must ensure that he undertakes to obtain the best price reasonably obtainable. So for example, if the land was worth 120 million and then he sells it for 5 million, he's going to have to make up for that shortfall and give it to the remainder man or the reversioners. And if he's exchanging land, it must be for a land of equivalent value. So for example, if he decides that instead of giving them money, he's going to give them another land instead, the land that he's giving must be a land of equivalent value to the land that they had interest in. So you can't say you're going to, okay, let me not give examples, but you have to give land of equal or equivalent value. He would get the land instead in that situation, because it's still I guess he could possibly also get money, but the court is going to look on the fact that his interest has been shifted from one land to another. So it's not like he has no interest at all. It's just that it's shifted from one thing to another. And that's what overreaching is, kind of like transferring your interest from the land that was originally intended to something else, be it money or some land of equivalent value, etc. So yeah. And also the life tenant owes a duty of trust and care, and he has to act in the best interest of the remainder men or reversioners. So it means that he has to look at what's best for them. So he can't do something that won't be in their best interest. And lastly, if the court realizes that this is happening, then the court can intervene. And what will happen is that the court will then say, all right,
No,
yeah, the
I
court will
have my shit together.
Hey. Oh, hey, things work out with Passion? It's great. Thank you. Better than great, actually.
right? Okay, so yeah, so I was saying that the courts can also intervene where there's impropriety, and pretty much the court will I don't know what exactly the courts will do. It's based on the specific circumstances, but in some instances the court will say, all right, you have to make up back the shortfall, or the court will say, this can't work, you have to I don't feel no way, I'm fine. But yeah, pretty much the court can intervene where there's impropriety. So and the cases Sir gave as examples are where the life tenant accepts a bribe, or where the life tenant makes an improper investment. And yes, that finally sums up estates and settlements. So all who did I watch TV can go back to them TV, not say a word. But yes, that pretty much sums it up. I hope it's short and I didn't just cut off things. But like when I read it, like these are the major things that came out. Like there's really nothing more to settlements based on my understanding. But if there's something I missed, okay. All right. Carol says I covered everything. So yeah, I would just say read the cases. I haven't read them either, but I remember Sarah was asking in my tutorial if they were ready yet. So I would just like skim over the cases, even if it's like a law teacher, e-law resources, so you have an idea of whatever. Okay. Oh, thank you so much, guys. Okay, so I'm way overdue because it took forever. So we're going to give the break now, and we're going to come back with Karen. So like what kind of break on a want? Like a 20 minutes or 15 minutes? What's keeping? Because I know my brain was tired. Okay, 15. Is 15 a consensus? Everybody fine with 15? And yes, I will send the info. Since I'm finished presenting now, I can probably send it off now. But yeah.
Big up Auntie Shackelford.
Oh, wow. No.
I stand. Big up Auntie Shackelford. That's a buzz.
No.
Very good, girl. Very
None of
good.
that. None of that. Okay, so you guys are on break until 10:15. What is the name we're working now? The name is Cameron. No,
Auntie Shackelford.
it's Cameron.
Cameron.
No.
Just add it more Latin to be Shackelford.
Leave me alone. So Ardeen Shackelford.
Shackelford.
Leave me alone. Anyways, we're not take up on our own break time. So we're coming back at 10:15 and Karen is gonna take it away. Okay? So 10:15, we will come back here. Bye-bye.
She even write the time like Shackelford.
No, leave me alone.
Exactly.
I'm taking it off. No, leave me alone. Okay, so it is 10:15. Karen, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Okay, all right. So passing over to Karen and she will take us through tenures.
So, good night, everybody. We're going to be going through this hopefully quickly enough. Feel free to stop me again if you have any questions or if you want me to go back over something. Okay. So, first, we're going to look at the definition of the term tenure. So, the term tenure really refers to the conditions under which land is held. And this concept is rooted in the feudal system because that's where it originated from, right? So, who can tell me what event led to the institution of the feudal system where the king owned all the lands? Somebody's, guys?
Norman Conquest.
Norman
Conquest.
Okay. Right, thank you. So it's a Norman conquest. So in 1066, William the Conqueror invaded England. And after doing so, he declared that as king, he owned all lands. Under this law, or under his rule, he implemented the feudal system, which was both a legal and social structure. So as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, you had kind of see like the hierarchy that you would have seen in the feudal society. So you would have the king on top who owned all lands. And then he would give land or interest in land to his tenants in chief, who were those who rendered some personal service to him. In turn, now, these tenants in chief would go and subdivide their land and let it to people who are loyal to them. The people who would be the tenants under the tenants in chief now would be called the mean tenants. If the mean tenant went and further subdivided the land and decided to let it to somebody else, the mean tenant now becomes a mean lord, and his tenant is known as the mean lord. The mean tenant. Is that clear?
Clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Clear.
All right. So under the feudal system, you would have seen the introduction of subinfeudation, which is a process of subdividing and letting the lands received, which we would have just talked about in terms of the hierarchy and how that goes, right? Reiterating again, that tenures are or were the terms or services or conditions on which a tenant held his land. And this arose out of standardization. So essentially, over time, what services or what conditions needed to be rendered to the feudal lord, they became standardized, and you would see that it would be separated into the different categories of tenures, which we're going to go through right now. So you have two types of tenures. You guys can see like up here, right? All here?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Here.
can see.
Okay. So first off, you have the free tenures under which the conditions of you having an interest in the land would be definite. So you knew exactly what you needed to do, for how long, at what time of the year, and if you're something that was dependent on quality, what type of quality was needed. So first you'd have military tenure, and under that you have knight service and grand sergeantry. On a knight service, you'd be required to provide the king with a certain number of knights for 40 days a year. In the grand sergeantry, on the other hand, you would provide some intimate service to the king. Then you'd also have spiritual tenure or francomoine, which was where land was granted to an ecclesiastical body or religious body who would pray and say masses for the king and his family, or for the repose of salvation of its grantor and heirs. This would also involve the giving of alms to the poor. And finally, you have, I think this is pronounced Stokage. You under this, you'd have petty sergeantry, where you'd render services of a non-personal nature, and common stockage, where you'd be providing agricultural goods that met a standard of quality and quantity to your feudal lord. Okay. Now, this is in comparison to unfree tenures, where the conditions of you holding your land, they're not definite at all. So basically, you're just catering to the whims of your feudal lord, and you had no means of protection if you were ejected from the land. This was referred to as villeinage, because you mostly had serfs or peasants or villeins. All those terms refer to the same class of people who were in the lowest rung of society, who would be in this class of tenure, or in this category of tenure. After the Black Death and the peasants' revolt, it became common to commute villein services to a definite amount of money for rent. So that would have been the evolution of villenage. So instead of you just catering to the whims of your feudal lord, now you have a definite amount of money that you're going to be paying. Eventually, however, as with the other types of tenures, which would have been the free tenures, this eventually disappeared in the 15th to the 16th century and was replaced by copyhold, and that too was eventually fell out of use over time. So again, who can tell me which two statutes sealed the fate of the feudal tenure? Anybody?
Tenures, Abolition Act, and Statute de Emptor.
Right, thank you. Okay, so under the Statute de Emptores that was passed in 1290 or was in effect in 1290, this abolished alienation by subinfeudation. So basically, you couldn't expand the feudal pyramid or feudal hierarchy further down. It could only expand horizontally. So also what was done is that alienation by substitution, you no longer had to get consent of your immediate feudal lord to participate in that. Important to note, however, you still had to get consent if you were a tenant-in-chief and you were seeking to utilize alienation by substitution, because you're now requesting this directly from the king rather than from some feudal lord who was directly above you. The second statute that we're looking at now is the Tenures Abolition Act of 1660. So the most onerous features of tenure abolished. So essentially this is talking about the different types of tenures really being abolished under this or falling out of use after the implementation of this statute. Many forms of tenure were converted to socage. So under this heading now, you would see that instead of having to provide a certain amount of produce, instead you know had to just provide a certain amount of rent to your feudal lord. Escheat and forfeiture remained as the only relevant aspects of tenure. So is that clear, guys? Yes, no? Anything you want me to go back over? Okay, I'm gonna. Okay. All right, so. Okay, so in terms of modern relevance of tenures, we have to look at the remnants of the doctrine, which should have been escheat, bona vacentia, and forfeiture. So on the escheat now, before the implementation of Statute de Emptores, you'd have seen that if the holder of a fee or a plot of land died without heirs or committed a felony, the land immediately reverted to the immediate superior feudal lord. So whoever was right above them, whoever was their lord that they were rendering services to before, it would have gone directly to them. After the Statute de Emptores was enacted now, land instead reverted to the crown. So since we're talking about reversion, no, this would mean that the crown always had title to this land in order for them to be getting it in reversion, right? Escheat, however, was abolished in many Commonwealth Caribbean countries and replaced by bona vacentia. So you have examples of the different statutes. You have the Jamaica Interstate Estates and Property Charges Act of 1937, Section 3, which explicitly states that escheat is abolished. You have Barbados Property Act of 1980, and at sections 5.1 and 5.3, even though it's not explicitly stated that escheat is abolished, you see that they refer to using bona vacentia instead, and they also explicitly state that feudal tenure is abolished. And finally, in Trinidad and Tobago's Distribution of Estates Act of 2000, you again see them saying that they're relying on bona vacentia. So what exactly is bona vacentia now? So this would apply in a situation where property without an owner would pass to the state rather than reverting to the crown as the ultimate owner. So in this case, in comparison
Excuse me, some of the times you go low and sometimes you go back high.
Oh no, okay, give me 1 second. Let me try to see if I can fix that. Oh, oh no, not better. Yikes. Okay. Is it no? Still not better. It's extremely low. I don't know why. Hmm. Can you hear me now, or is it still really low?
You're audible, Karen. Karen, rather.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna try and continue like this. If it gets worse, just tell me and I'll try and see if I can fix it. So just talking about Bonaventure again. In this or under this concept now, what happens is that rather than the state always having title to the property or title to the land, they instead gain title to the land once it is that it's a property without an owner. So same type of situation where the holder of the land would have died without any heirs to pass it to, or they had committed some type of crime, then the state would gain title to the land. So again, the same two statutes that would have explicitly mentioned Bonaventure would have been the Barbados Property Act of 1980, sections 5.1 and 5.3, and the Trinidad and Tobago Distribution of Estates Act of 2000 at section 26C. So those two explicitly mention the use of Bonaventure. Okay. So this is just a table going over the same things I just said in terms of the differences. For a sheet now, you can see that the crown has always had title to the land, whereas for Bonaventure, the state did not always have title to the land, but instead they gained new title. So again, escheat, the crown would regain control of the land, meaning that they had always had title to the land. Whereas Bonaventure, the state now gains new title rather than them having always had title to the land. Is that clear? Guys? Wait, can you just not hear me?
Yes, I'm following.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So last thing we're looking at now is in terms of forfeiture. So this would operate where the grantee breaches some condition relating to the grant, and as a result, the estate reverts to the grantor. This would apply to certain types of fee simple that may be determined in other ways than death without heirs. So it's going to be touched on more in later topics, but this is all you really need to know about forfeiture for right now. So right now we're going to be going into the territory of radical and native title. So the first question is really, what's the difference between ceded and settled territories? If anyone wants to offer an answer. Nobody? Okay. Thank you, Jeffrey. So yeah, so in ceded or conquered territories, what essentially would have happened is that the land would have been previously occupied by some other quote unquote civilized nation. So, you know, this is very deep colonial lingo, meaning that civilized nations here is really just referring to Europeans, right? So land here was conquered and the law was imposed. So an example of this is for Jamaica now, when we were previously occupied by the Spanish, but the British came and took over. That's an example of a conquered territory. In terms of settled now, settled lands were those which were deemed to be terra nullius or without any owner or uninhabited. And essentially under this, or in this time period, colonial era especially, land was deemed to be terra nullius, even if it was occupied by natives. Here, no, the land would have been received rather than imposed. So the next thing for consideration is if all lands were owned by the crown and these natives occupied the land prior to colonization, then who had title to the land that the natives were occupying? So radical title now is defined as the crown or state having ultimate title to the land. That is, they own all lands. And you can see this reflected again based on what William the Conqueror would have laid down after, Norman conquest, stating that he owns all land as the king. So this is still persisting on the radical title. Native title, on the other hand, refers to the recognition of the interest in the land held by indigenous peoples who have customarily occupied the land. And as you might remember from LLS, you're kind of looking at if these natives have occupied the land for time immemorial. So that's kind of what it looks like when you're talking about customary occupation. So in Amodu Tijani, which is a Nigerian case, Viscount Haldane essentially said that ownership and possession are not necessarily intertwined to a large degree, meaning that the crown can actually have legal title, but not full beneficial title. So the natives in this case would have usufructory rights or rights to use and enjoyment of the land. That would be a burden on radical title. Burden meaning that instead of the crown having full beneficial title to all lands, the natives still retain their title in the land. Viscount Haldane also said that a mere change in sovereignty is not presumed to displace rights of private owners. So same type of thing, just because you came and conquered a territory that natives were living on, that doesn't mean that you automatically get title to the land that they were occupying. Instead, their rights to that land that they have been occupying for time immemorial, it's not just displaced just because you came and decided that you're going to set up shop there. So essentially, the crown having legal title or having title to the land is deemed to be really only for conveyancing purposes, and it doesn't also already existing titles. Should have been the same thing I just said about, you coming to colonize a land. Just because you've come and conquered this territory doesn't mean that you can now just automatically displace the natives' title to the land that they have been occupying for time immemorial. In Mabono, it was stated that if the land was truly terra nullius, meaning that it was truly uninhabited, then the crown had a radical title. But if indigenes or indigenous people had occupied the lands, they must be treated or considered differently. So again, just hitting at the same concept of just because you've come and colonized or conquered a territory doesn't mean that you automatically can displace the rights of the natives who have been living there before you came. If the land rights of the indigenes are capable of being recognized by the common law, then the crown has no radical title to those lands. So the question now becomes, how do you establish if the land rights are capable of being recognized by the common law? So the answer to this question now is you examine whether the rights are usufructory, which means if they're for use and enjoyment, or if they are repugnant to the common law. So of course, if they are repugnant to the common law, they will not be recognized under the common law. Additionally, post-independence, the rights to this land will still exist. So even after independence, the natives who have title to their land, they still retain native titles to those lands, even after the colonial period has passed and the state has become independent. So again in Mabono, Brennan J said that fallaciously equating sovereignty and beneficial ownership leads to the incorrect idea that change in or acquisition of sovereignty extinguishes native title. So he's essentially saying here that, you're wrongly trying to say that just because you are the sovereign or you're ruling over this territory, that you must have full beneficial title, or you must have both legal and beneficial title to all of the land. which is not correct because we would have just said that native title again would have been a burden non-radical title. So the crown would not have had full beneficial title to the lands. So because of this error or this fallacy in thinking, it leads to the incorrect idea that just because you have conquered a territory or you have settled in a territory, that automatically extinguishes native title, which, as we have just talked about before, that's not true. It's not necessarily true. So furthermore, in Aegean Appa, yeah, Elias CJ, the Chief Justice, was basically saying that customary rights of native community persist until lawfully extinguished. So before we go on to extinguishing rights, we're going to look at Kalan Angie, which is a case for Alto Belize, where it was stated that, again, changing or acquisition of sovereignty does not extinguish pre-existing rights. And customary occupation and rights are recognizable under the common law. So this case was a case that we would have looked at in LLS. Let me just put it up real quick, just to give a brief, very, very brief summary of what happened in that case. Give me 1 second. Okay. So in this case, remember how we were saying that the condition of being able to recognize native title, it must have been that they have customarily occupied the lands. So essentially, the government in this case was trying to argue that, you guys left for a time period, so you have not occupied the lands for time immemorial. But the court found that they had left out of necessity because of colonization, and if they had not left, they would have died. So they were treated as having occupied the land for time immemorial. And also they did come back, did reestablish themselves in the same lands that they had occupied before. Okay, yeah, I think that's it for that case. That's important. So now we're going to be looking at legal protection of native title. So even though native title is recognized by the common law, not all protections are afforded to, protect it or uphold it under the common law. So again, in Mabo, it was stated that some statutes may be implemented for protection of native title. If native title was surrendered in expectation of a tenure to be granted from the crown, then the crown may have a fiduciary duty to actually grant or fulfill that expectation. Next, legal and equitable remedies may actually be available to the natives. And finally, they can actually bring representative action on behalf of the entire indigenous community that has been affected. And you would kind of see this being done in cases like Thomas Arau Council. And I believe also in, let me check what's the name of the case. Also in Maudu Tijani was another case where it was the entire community was represented by one person who was the chief in each of those cases. Next case now, another case from LLS, Maya Leaders Alliance. In this case, it was basically stated that constitutional protections can be provided to protect the native title. These can include like the right against arbitrary deprivation of land and the right to protection of the law, which includes international obligations. So in that case, they looked at the fact that under international law, they had an obligation to recognize and protect the rights and interests of natives, which was actually instrumental in making their decision. Another case that's really strong in terms of constitutional protections would have been Thomas Arau, which is on another slide, which was a Guyanese case. As you can see on the slide, Guyana actually has entrenched in their constitution a specific provision speaking to protection of natives and their title. And in that case, this was actually relied on to justify why they should have been granted protection. So as you can see, Article 149G of the Guyanese Constitution, that actually provides protection to Amerindian ways of life. So right to enjoyment of life, and nothing should really harm them in existing on their land that they have title to. In Thomasero, even though it was deemed that the lands in question did not actually belong to the natives, this provision was actually relied on to state that the government should have stopped mining, because by them mining, they're sullying or dirtying up the water, and that water in the river that's going to flow down to the lands that they actually did occupy, that was negatively impacting the natives' way of life, which would have been contrary to this constitutional provision. So I think this is the second to last thing. Private land rights can also be extinguished by the sovereign using their prerogative power, which would have been remaining power after, they don't have as much power as they would have had in years gone by, right? So this would have been stated in Mabo again. And additionally, it can also be extinguished by consent or through the use of statute, which was considered or looked at in Thomasero, which is again a case from Guyana. However, it must be noted that plain and clear intention to extinguish the native title must be provided by the state. And in Mabo, it was stated that the justification for this requirement is that you extinguishing native title has such grave consequences to the natives who were inhabiting the land and their descendants after them. So it's such a grave consequence or such a serious consequence of trying to extinguish their title that you must have fulfilled this condition for it to be deemed that, yes, native title was truly extinguished. It was also said in Mabo that where customs relating to the native title had evaporated over time, they could not be revived. So essentially where the custom had died out, the state's radical title would have been deemed to have expanded and actually claimed these lands. So lands that would have previously been deemed to belong to the natives now fully belong to the crown under a full beneficial title, which comprises of the actual legal ties to the land and the beneficial title to use and enjoyment of the actual lands. It was also stated that a right or interest possessed by a native title or possessed as native title could not be passed to somebody's mic is open. No, okay. So it was also said that a right or interest possessed as a native title could not be passed to somebody who was not a member of the native community, did not follow their laws or accept their custom. That person could not be deemed to have native title. It could only be passed to or only be deemed to apply to those who are actually a part of the identifiable native community. The right to actually gain an interest in land that was once covered by native title can be acquired outside of the laws and customs, but only by the crown. So essentially saying that if you're trying to acquire a land that's covered by native title and you're not somebody who is a part of the native community, you don't follow their laws or anything, essentially that would have been looking at radical title taking over that whatever they were granting to you. Native title could no longer protect that grant. And I think this is the final thing. Oh yeah, this is the final thing. So it would have gone over the definition of tenures, which would have been, if anybody wants to say what the definition of tenures is, that would be very reassuring if anybody wants to say that.
The conditions under which one owns lands.
Okay, thank you. Right. Then we would have had the Norman Conquest and its effects. So you would have seen 1066, where William the Conqueror would have invaded, blah, blah, blah. You know the rest of the story. The effect being the establishment of feudal system. And you would also have seen sub-infeudation and tenures coming out of that system. The types of tenures, if anybody wants to tell me what those two types of tenures are, main two types.
Free and unfree.
Thank you. Yes. And we would have touched on the different subdivisions under those. You also see statutory intervention, which would have touched on the dwindling effect of the doctrine or concept of tenures, which would have been Statute Quien Torres from 1290 and the Tenures Abolition Act of 1660. We also would have looked at the modern relevance or remnants of the doctrine of tenures. And we would have touched on the Caribbean statutes that deal with that. So it would have been the Jamaican Intestate Act. You would have had Trinidad and Tobago's, I think that's the Distributional Land Act, and Barbados's, I think that's the Property Act as well. All of them basically dealing with the whole issue of either expressly abolishing feudal tenure, which would have been seen in Barbados's Act, expressly abolishing the use of escheat, which would have been seen in Jamaica's Act, or expressly referring to the use of bona vacantia instead, which have been seen in Barbados's Act and Trinidad and Tobago's Act. And finally, we would have looked at radical and native title and established the fact that native title is a burden on radical title, because even though it's usually deemed that the crown has title or they own all lands in a territory, once there is an identifiable group of natives that have customarily occupied a plot of land for time immemorial, they will be deemed to have native title. And there are situations that title will be extinguished and radical title can take over. But important thing is to remember is just because there's been a change in or acquisition of sovereignty, that doesn't mean that the native title has automatically been extinguished. So I hope that was clear. You guys didn't really like say anything while I was talking. So I hope that was clear. And yeah, back to Andrine, I guess.
Okay, that was amazing, Karen. Thank you so much. I'm sure everybody is grateful. Like 10 years was a mess for me, and from listening, it really helped me. So thank you so much. And yes, I know all of us are tired. We are ready to go to sleep. So it was a good night. It was extremely productive, but just really quickly, I just want to remind you that tomorrow we're meeting at the same time. So use the time where everybody that presented will be sending, just me and Karen, will be sending resources, the things that we used in the chat. Please try your best to look over them and just look over your lecture notes, etc. as well, because tomorrow we're coming and it's games night, right? So it's going to be a competition. There's going to be 2 groups. So please try and come in early so that we can start out the groups. You're going to be grouped into 2, and then a bag of nice things will be happening. So know your cases, know your statutes, know the years. Not giving out any more hints as to what the games will be. Come prepared for buzzer section though. So make sure to have somebody when I go call upon and send them up to, So yeah, please just read over. Yes, school challenge quiz things. Oh, I did? Okay, then thank God. But okay, so that's it for tonight then. Thank you for coming out, everyone. I mean, about Pill, when I look on Pill. Real property. Real property. Pill is next week. Pill is next week.
All right. Not Karen. So before y'all go, I just want to thank you guys again for coming out to make this a success. Sorry, Jesus. And so I hope it was really beneficial, and I will see you all tomorrow. And my beautiful, nice, clean deputy, Andrine, can also stop recording. So yeah, have fun, guys. Study. Bye.
Bye. See you tomorrow.
Yes, the slides will be shared in both groups. So you guys will get them then. And then we'll share the recording also when it is ready. So you don't have to load up a list on the device, and then it will be shared.
Alia, please come tell me how to stop the live, because I don't know how to do this.
Oh geez, make me co-host or something.
You are co-host, Alia.
Hey. Okay. right, Sir
No,
Prince.
YouTube watching us struggle. Love that.
I wonder if we end meeting for all, it ends automatically.
Okay, can try. Oh, but it's Prince has to end the meeting.
I think, let me see.
But I have the option to leave.
Prince, if you're here hearing us, if you're not, please try hear us by some means and end the meeting for all for us. Thank you. All right.